Across the world, people have their housing costs taken away as much as half of their income. Have you ever thought of trying to change that? The good news is there is a way. House hacking is real, and we are here to show you how other people just like you have made it happen. Welcome to the House Hacking Podcast. And here is your host, house hacking expert, Andrew Kerr.
Hey folks, thanks for tuning in. You realize this is a very unique and difficult position that we're all in. The world is essentially upside down right now. And while I have several years of experience doing disaster response work, I don't have any sort of scientific background, and I am not really clued in at all to this emergency response that we're doing here in the US and around the world. So I'm purposely making for our channel to not focus on the coronavirus or COVID-19 and instead continue to focus on house hacking and how house hacking can help build a strong future for your finances. That way, when there's small pullbacks in the market, there's ups and downs in your financial life, or like what we're having right now, a complete black swan type event, you're in a strong financial position to make it through. Now, today's guest basically ended up homeless after the 2007-2008 crisis. Another one of these big one-off lifetime things that throw the world upside down. And what he could do, or what he could, I should say, is really all he could afford was a bed in a hostel. It was that or sleeping in his car. And what we're going to hear in this episode is how he sort of turned his life around and used a roommate-style house hacking to build a stronger financial future. So folks, thanks again for tuning in. Try to focus on the good stuff, help each other out, and I hope you enjoy the episode today with Ken. So with that, let's go ahead and bring him on. All right, Ken, thank you for coming on the show today. I'm really excited to hear about your story. I think you've got this great story of how you went through some challenges and now having this really interesting house hacking experience. So thank you for being on. How are you doing today?
It is a beautiful night. We just had ourselves a big old dumping snowstorm outside Denver. We got about somewhere between 3 to 6 inches, depending on where you are, and it's winter wonderland before Halloween. I can't describe it really. Oh,
awesome. And as he just alluded to, we're actually recording this just a few days before Halloween. So when his episode airs sometime in a couple of months, if you're wondering about the timing, that's when we're in. So, you're actually in the Denver area. That I think it makes it even more interesting because you're in this higher cost of living area. So could you actually just give us this nice sort of high level summary of your experience and how you ended up doing a house hack?
Well, so before I ended up picking up the house I'm in now, I've always been in a variety of roommate relationships. Back when I was in uniform, back during my time in the military, in the very beginning, not only did you have the dormitories and the shared bunk beds during basic training, but even when you go to the permanent duty station, I would end up having to share a bathroom with someone living on base. Moving off base, picked up a roommate, ended up taking in the benefits package, the BAH, they call it BAQ, the basic housing allowance. And I would go ahead and get a roommate for that because it's just to save up money in the long run. After my time in the service, the short version is I moved down to Florida, South Florida, back in 2007-ish. First time living alone in a long time. That was expensive. Roughly half of my housing costs, roughly half of my paycheck was going to housing costs.
Yeah.
And either I would have to pick up a second job, which I ended up doing, picking up a tutoring gig. And at the end of my 1-year lease, ended up picking up a roommate again and went back into the old habits. Then 2008 happened. 2008 was a terrible time for most of us. It hit me very hard. I ended up having to take a reduction to pay from 15 an hour to 12 an hour on a not quite full time basis.
Yeah.
Yeah, very rough. I ended up getting an opportunity to move out to Colorado in 2010 to transfer. And the short version is that didn't work out as well as I'd hoped. And uh, I had to find any kind of work I possibly could. So I signed up for a temp agency, and frankly, I moved into a hostel. Um, I did not have a bedroom to call my own, and I ended up being there for 2 years, roughly.
Oh, wow. So basically 2010 to 2012 is somewhere in there. You were essentially living in a hostel.
Yeah, it was definitely an experience. It had some highs, it had some lows. On the bright side, because a hostel is normally an international travel kind of thing, there were a lot of people cycling through. There's still someone that I keep up from Australia, folk from North Carolina, folk from Scandinavian countries. But on the whole, there were also some people who were trying to get off the streets and just have a roof over their head for a couple of nights. Not the greatest experiences, but eventually I ended up making a friend who offered his couch to me in his apartment a couple of miles down the street, and that got me out of being on the edge of homeless to just crashing on a couch. I was able to pick up better paying work along the way. Eventually, finally got into a room of my own in 2015 timeframe, and found much better paying work after that, and eventually was able to save up to purchase a house in the February of 2018.
Oh, wow. I mean, it sounds like you had I know so many people had a really rough time during the financial collapse there in the 07, 08, 09 period. And I mean, it sounds like you had a really just sort of tough climb out. And I mean, congratulations on getting through that and then getting to a point where you are actually able to become a homeowner.
Yeah, it was definitely an experience and a ride, and I have a lot of people to thank along the journey, including the guy who offered me the couch to stay on for roughly the same as what I was paying to live in a room where the three grown men that were sharing a space. Um, I've got to thank the guy who recommended it that I go to a different staffing agency and pick up better skills. There were a lot of people that I have to thank along the way who got me into a more stable living situation where I could continue to ramp up and grow from there. So it's definitely not just me.
Well, let's really start to dig into this where, you finally got to a point where you're able to buy a house. Did you know what house hacking was at this point? Or was it, I'm just finally at a point where I want to be able to buy a house? Was there any intention of, I'm going to do a room rental house hack style? Like what was your sort of thought process at this point? And, what was your motivation to actually getting to buying a house?
So the way that I saw it, I've been familiar with the financial independence blogs and communities and whatnot. Even back when I was in the hostel, I found Mr. Money Mustache sometime around 2012, 2013. And even though I wasn't in a position to be able to be like actionable on it, I was frugal by necessity. If instead of taking a bus, if I could cycle there, I would take it. I'd save that $5. I'd save that the 30 minutes of work after tax, and that would go towards whatever else I wanted. As far as the housing situation went, I'm aware that was kind of a plan that came up out of necessity, really, where I knew that I did not want to repeat that experience of housing instability ever again, flat out, hard limit, bar none, not happening. So I figured the only way that I could maintain some semblance of stability was, instead of having to deal with renting apartments and having rooms there, I was already seeing rent increases in apartments in the South Denver area. Three men to an apartment at the time was under 1,000, but it didn't stay that way for long.
Yeah.
And figured that as the economy continued to improve, that rents would rise. And it was really just me trying to figure out how I would be able to weather the rise in rents. Either I can pay rent to someone else, or frankly, other people can pay rent to me. That was the seed of it. I can't tell you exactly when I decided that was a plan I could take on, but I was definitely searching in earnest, around the mid 2017 timeframe.
Okay, cool. So you've gotten through this challenging time. You said like, hey, I've had this really financial low. I know if I get in a good housing situation and have roommates, like no matter what happens with the job, it's creating this nice stability for you. So you found a house. How'd you end up buying the house? What type of loan did you do? What'd you have to do for a down payment? What'd you end up buying the house for, actually, a sales price?
Okay, so I ended up purchasing a house of 3-bed, 1.5 bath for $285K. That is well under the average for the Denver metro area. At the time, I think it was still like around 350 or so. Thankfully, because I am a veteran with an honorable discharge, I was able to pick up a 0% down VA loan. I had already saved up a few thousand, maybe around 15K or so, in case there were any incidentals that I absolutely had to purchase, like a new water heater, or if the furnace went out, something like that. I would have that nest egg to work with. But thankfully, with my service, 0% down was the deal. Finding the house was a challenge. I'm not sure if you follow the Denver metro market at all, but at the time, if a house went on the market and it was under 350,000, it would be under contract within a week.
Yeah.
I found a realtor, and God bless her. She and I, we would see houses on my lunch break. We would see houses on Saturdays, and almost every week I would have an offer or two in, and one offer per house. I'd pick the best out of the batch of 4 or 5. Here's my offer, and I would lose out every time. Unfortunately, because of my pay situation, I was making $21 an hour at the time. I would only qualify for up to roughly $325. I said that I could not handle anything less than $300,000 because of making sure that I had some semblance of a buffer in order to handle any rough moments. Like, if I had vacancies, could I still handle the mortgage?
Yeah.
And that actually ended up serving me really well, because as it turns out, even picking up something for $285, that threw my debt to income ratio to 47%. I was very, very close to not being allowed to take a loan for that much, even though I technically qualified for more.
Well, I think that's a good point that you make. It's sort of crazy what a bank will say you can actually qualify for, but just because a bank is saying you qualify for it doesn't mean it's actually a payment that we can afford, and then not only afford, but afford and not stretch ourselves and make it so we're so strapped when something does come up that we're all of a sudden in this sort of financial crunch. So yeah, I'm really glad that you sort of mentioned that, because I think that's one of the biggest mistakes new homeowners buy is the bank says, great, you can buy a $350,000 house. They automatically go buy a $350,000 house. And you were smart and you said, okay, they said 325. I really want to be under 300. And you ended up finding a place and able to close at 285 on it.
Yeah. And even then, that took months. I started I had a house under contract in October that fell through due to finding structural issues on the inspection. I had to back out of that deal, and then I spent a good 2 months after that just looking at houses, looking at houses. I would begin to, as I continued to lose out on contracts, I was raising the amount of earnest money I was willing to put up, doubling the earnest money to say that I'm serious about this. That didn't work. So eventually I gave in and just started offering 10,000 over asking, just no questions asked. And eventually I found what I'm in now, and that offer got answered.
Awesome. That's great. And I really like the fact that you are super persistent. I mean, one of the things folks say is like, oh, it's easy to be successful in real estate if you're buying in like 2010, 2011, 2012, those sort of early years right after the recession. But you actually did it and were able to buy a house in 2018. It wasn't easy, but you had this persistence and kept figuring out, let me tweak my offers, add more for earnest money, come a little bit over ask. So you bought the house. You said you paid a little bit over ask. Did the house actually appraise enough, or did you actually have to, did it appraise enough so the loan would actually cover the full purchase price, or did you actually have to bring some extra cash to closing to cover that difference from the appraised value to the purchase price?
Yeah, the appraisal actually did come in at 285. Funny enough, there had been a reputation for a while that VA appraisals, the VA has their own department where they go out and they do appraising on the houses that are going to be buying. And for a time, probably 10, 15 years before I bought, the appraisals at the time were coming in below bids, and that generated a lot of controversy, a lot of ill feelings that stuck with realtors who were around at the time. And I heard that there was a reputation, but thankfully I did not suffer the ill effects of it.
Awesome. So you finally got the house. You were persistent. You were able to close. Now, when you bought the house, did it actually need any work, or was it essentially about move-in ready, where maybe there's some cosmetics that you wouldn't mind changing to make it your own, but were there any other big issues that needed immediate attention?
There were some minor mechanical maintenance issues. There weren't any curtain rods or anything like that. The windows are still original with the house that was built in 1949, and they had so they'd have these crank windows that you spin. You spin a crank, and it just kind of opens almost accordion style and closes the same way. I ended up having to pick up a couple of replacements and knobs on that. Not too terribly expensive, but they're just little doodads, really. Not much in the way of real problems.
Yeah, just little minor things coming up. Okay, so that's good. So you bought the house. It's a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bathroom. You knew you wanted to be able to have some roommates. So how'd you actually go out about finding roommates?
The first two things I decided to do, I tried advertising on Craigslist. I tried advertising on Facebook Marketplace. And the other thing is that I also used Facebook groups. There are multiple roommates seeking Facebook groups geared towards the Denver metro area, and that was where I ended up finding the most success. I am aware now of more avenues I could have pursued, but that's just something that I've been having to learn as I go as far as marketing.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So I've done a lot of the post on Zillow and Craigslist and the Facebook Marketplace, but I actually haven't looked at any of those room rental individual groups. That's something I'll actually have to start doing for my area. I'm glad you brought that up. Cool little tip. Even I can keep learning some stuff. So thank you.
Yeah. Just search a Facebook group, roommates, your city, and see what comes up.
Cool. All right. So you use that to find the roommates. How'd you actually end up screening these potential roommates and tenants?
So a lot of the people that I've been reading on the forums, they had been very adamant about using a website called cozy.co.
Yep. I actually use Cozy myself. So yeah.
That was a common one that people recommended to use, where people will, prospective tenants will just input their information they'll provide the upfront cost, and I'll make sure that anyone who does apply and does the background check, I tell them that is their application fee. They're only paying this company to run your background check. I'm not taking any extra off the top for it. There has been some controversy in our city about application fees being more than just a background check. There was an administrative fee that was non-refundable that was being kept. And there's been some hard feelings in some communities for that. So to try to sell myself as someone who is more understanding, sell myself breaking into the marketplace, I need to advertise myself as a better deal any way I can.
Yeah.
And if I have to nix the administrative fee, absolutely, I'll do that. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to stand out when folks realize like, oh, I just got to pay the actual credit and background check, and it's not going to him, it's going to the company that actually does it. Like, that seems like a pretty fair deal. So you use Cozy to screen the tenants that you found through the Facebook groups and Marketplace and Craigslist. So when you bought the house, what did your actual payment come out to with the VA loan?
Everything kit and caboodle, the insurance, taxes, and all that, it came out to roughly $1,700 a month.
Okay, so your mortgage all in, $1,700 a month, and now you've got 2 roommates in this 3-bedroom house. So are you living in the master and renting the other 2 rooms, or did you say, hey, I'm going to rent out the master because that's the bigger room, and I'll live in one of the bedrooms? How did all that work out?
Yeah, actually, I did decide that I was going to rent out the master bedroom, just simply because I figured that it would go for more than a spare. That's it's only $150 difference for my last lease, but $150 a month over a year, that adds up.
Yeah,
every month.
Yeah, that definitely adds up. All right, so you've got the 2 roommates. One's in a spare, one's in the master. You're living in the 3rd room. What are you getting rents for the 2 rooms?
All told, at the time it was $1,250. Since then, just last month, my master bedroom roommates moved out to find her own place closer to work.
Okay, and then are you going to remarket that out, or are you going to look at living in the master and rent out the spare that you were in?
So I'm actually bringing in a contractor to do a redo on the master bathroom. It is a tiny little thing. It is a toilet, a sink, and 10 square feet. I'm looking to have some extra space carved out from a adjoining room and make upgrade from a half bath to a full bath. Throw in a tub, throw in a shower, a real vanity, and hopefully be able to turn that around for more than what I was getting previously.
Oh, cool. That sounds like a good plan. But I just want to pause for a second and go back here. I mean, literally you went from struggling after the financial crisis to living in a hostel, living on a friend's couch, to now you're in Denver, a high cost of living area with a real estate market that just has exploded. You've got a mortgage payment all in at $1,700 a month, and you're bringing in $1,250 a month. I mean, you're basically living in a house for $450 a month. You've got a place to live, less than $500 in a high cost of living area. And then on top of that, your tenants are helping you pay down your mortgage. I mean, this is like, you literally went from a very big financial challenge to now, it sounds like you've got a pretty secure place financially that you're living in.
It is a huge weight off my shoulders, let me tell you.
Yeah. I mean, talk about a big financial win for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes down basically to being able to have the fortitude, the character and whatnot to allow oneself to continue to live like a broke college student.
Yeah. So now essentially with this savings is this how the savings that you've had in the lower housing costs, is that what you're going to then use to fund the little expansion of the half bath there?
That's the short version is my nest egg is going to fund that, because of the roommates were paying in that surplus actually ended up going into a 401k, and now this time around after the nest egg pays off the bathroom redo, then the extra rent is going to go to replenish the nest egg again and go from there.
Awesome. Awesome. I mean, so I think this is just an incredible story where, I mean, you had so many challenges and you persevered, and now you're in such a better financial situation. I mean, if you're sort of thinking back through, the last several years and also, your experience here with the house hacking, I mean, what do you think one of your biggest sort of successes were or wins were over this period of time?
The moment that I realized that the plan was actually working was in mid to late summer of 2018. It had taken me a couple of months to get leases signed for roommates to come in. And granted, these were short-term roommates. They were only going to be staying for 3 months. But again, 3 months is 3 months. It's better than nothing. And as just a little bit of celebration to welcome to the house, I ended up picking up some roast. Get a little bit of what's the word for it? Dry rub. Big old cook, big old dinner. And we just sat down in the living room to a table, and it just all the weight of everything that had come before just really felt like it lifted. And I had the biggest grin on my face, I'll tell you.
Yeah, pretty cool dinner to have, and just sort of think back. I'm like, man, this actually was really working out. One thing you mentioned, actually, I want to ask you about. So you mentioned leases. So I notice sometimes in room rental situations, folks won't actually do leases, but it sounds like you actually had your roommate tenants sign leases.
I do. I think it works really well also as a kind of a screening in a sense. Like if someone is not willing to sign up anything for having character references that I can call on, employment that I can call and verify, then that, granted, I am not living in the nicest part of town. It's not particularly high crime or anything like that. It's not like there's murders every other day or whatever. But I'm technically priced out of Denver County into nearby Aurora, Adams County. It's a lower cost of living area. It's still close, but it's definitely not the greatest neighborhood. So in order to keep myself protected, not just my stuff, my own personal safety, having somebody put that kind of accountability on themselves to say, no, this is who I am. This is what I'm bringing in. These are the people who vouch for me. That is an absolute necessity for myself.
Yeah, I think that's one of the perfect examples of like a screening tool. If you're not willing to sign a lease, you're obviously going to be a little shady. So it's a great tool to have in there. Thinking back through this sort of house hacking and sort of changing around your financial situation, what do you think one of your biggest challenges was, or if there's something you could go back and change and do differently, what might that look like?
Marketing. Definitely marketing. It should not have taken me 2.5 months to get someone in to see a room and to apply and to have a lease. I will definitely be using Zillow, using more websites, advertising through the local hospital down the street from me. So far, that has been the largest challenge by far, not even close, is the marketing aspect.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that the more channels you can put your rental out at, the better success you have. And my big approach is the shotgun approach. I try to do all of them, like the Zillow, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, as many as I can. I just think it increases my odds. So, yeah, I think that's a good lesson learned. And thanks for sharing that with us. So, I know obviously you bought the place in 2018. We're here in end of October in 2019, but I mean, have you started to think about your next move? I mean, how long do you plan to stay in this house, or would you do another house hack again after this place?
Yeah, right now there are two main projects that I want to put into the house to make it rent ready. If I were to move out and repeat the process, it's another house. it's definitely not out of the question. It's definitely something that I'm thinking about, that I'm pondering, but it's more like something 5 years down the road as opposed to next year or in the next 2 years. My finances and my game plan for getting this house rent ready just are not going to allow for that.
Cool. Well, I mean, it sounds like it's working out for you now, and it's cool that you're already starting to think, 5 years down the road for that next plan. I really appreciate you coming on and sort of sharing your story, and especially some of the challenges that you had. I mean, I think it's such a cool success story. If we persevere and we don't give up, we can really get ahead. And I appreciate you being so open about your whole story. But before you go, what we like to do is ask all of our guests a set of final 6 questions. We like to call this section
The Famous 6.
So 6 questions, rapid fire succession. Are you ready for it?
I'll do my dangest.
Awesome. All right. So number 1, what is your favorite personal finance blog, book, or podcast?
So the 3 podcasts that I listen to the most are Stacking Benjamins, Choose FI, and Afford Anything. I don't read a lot of blogs. I drive all over the creation for my job, so podcasts are the way that I take in my info.
Awesome. Yeah, I love the Choose FI podcast. I'm only in, I think, around 60, 70 episodes. I just discovered it beginning of 2019. So it's pretty cool knowing that they're way out, like episode 150 at this point, where I can listen to 2, 3 a week, and I'm slowly getting caught up. But yeah, I love that one. So very similar question number 2. What's your favorite real estate related blog, book, or podcast?
I actually... The only one that I listen to right now is a Denver Real Estate Podcast. It's by Your Castle Real Estate, because, like politics, all real estate is local. I mostly want to listen to what locals are putting out, and this guy has been putting out content fairly regularly for the past 2.5 or so years, and has definitely proven himself as a worthwhile resource.
That's awesome that you have a podcast that's such hyper focused on the Denver market. So that's really cool. And I'll be sure to link to that in the show notes, along with the Stacking Benjamins, Afford Anything, and Choose FI for folks that want to find out more about those. All right. So number 3, what's been your favorite travel destination that you've been to so far?
Ooh, I'm going to have to be a little bit of the rebel on this one. I have lived in a lot of different areas. I've lived in North Carolina, Maryland, South Florida, Washington State, Texas, now Denver. I guess you could call myself a bit of a slow traveler. Frankly, I love living in the Denver metro area. I've traveled to a couple of places, but to be honest, I'm more interested in trying to set in roots and actually become a part of the neighborhood that I'm living in right now. Favorite destination is frankly not a priority for me right now.
Well, it sounds like you're actually living in your favorite destination of Denver.
Okay, sure, I'll take that.
Awesome. All right, so then you might have just answered this question is, what's sort of next on the horizon as far as like any travel, vacation plans coming up over the next couple years for you?
So yeah, plans for the next couple of years. I am going to need to focus on my career a little bit more. I've recently switched jobs, doing the same kind of work for a different company, and I'm also looking to pick up extra skills in geographic information systems. Now, I currently work as a utility locator, which means I use maps of all the utilities that are buried that a specific company owns, and I go around and mark them out. I figured I can use that field experience and some prior computer experience that I've just picked up over the years, and try to be a dual guy who can both be in the field and be in the back office doing different things. Right now, growing my income is my chief priority at this point.
Cool. I mean, I think the more skills we can build to make us more marketable and increase our pay is definitely a good thing, and definitely something to focus on. All right. So number 5 is, what is your biggest bucket list item that you haven't accomplished yet?
Let's go with marriage. Let's do that.
That's a good one. That's a good one. All right.
Yeah.
And then,
never done that before. I just haven't found her yet. I'm looking forward to it.
Cool. Well, that's definitely a good bucket list item to have, and hopefully it comes up soon for you. So now, number 6, and the final question is: what is your sort of favorite life hack?
So, this also ties back into my current job. I currently drive a work vehicle. The company provides a vehicle that I can take home with me. This is one of the biggest things as far as keeping life expenses lower, in that I do not have to pay for gas. I don't have to pay for insurance, and I can take a grocery shopping trip on the way home once in a while. And when I am not driving for work, my other vehicle has pedals. I'm still a limousine in the way. I have a bike and I take that everywhere. I use RTD. Keeping my transportation costs low is definitely something that's, beautiful story. When I first moved to Colorado back in 2010, I bought a bicycle, just a cheap Walmart deal, and I ended up doing a 25-mile round trip my first weekend in Colorado in the middle of summer. You can't do that on the East Coast where I'm from.
Yeah.
And so getting cycling and keeping cycling into my lifestyle routine has been important for me ever since.
Yeah, sounds like a really frugal win. I mean, we've got some of the biggest expenses we have are housing, auto, healthcare, and taxes. And I mean, you're hacking your housing and you're sort of hacking your auto cost. I mean, super frugal wins. Definitely very cool life hack is to find the job that can actually give you the work vehicle and cover the gas. So awesome. Ken, I really appreciate you being on. Thank you again for your military service. Really appreciate that as well. And I appreciate you being just so open about your experience. And I know it's definitely going to relate with some of the listeners that are having those financial struggles or had them and just slowly getting out of them. But I mean, you had a huge turnaround in your financial picture, and the fact that you were so open with it is awesome. So thank you again for being on. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for the opportunity to share my story.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you for listening to the House Hacking Podcast. For more up-to-date information on house hacking, to access links and resources mentioned in today's show, and connect with a guest and host, head over to www.fibrei.com. That's www.fibrei.com, where your house hacking journey begins.